A truce between Israel and Hamas militants has been extended into a seventh day. Germany, the U.S. and other countries consider Hamas a terrorist group. Negotiations on prolonging the pause in fighting, which began last Friday, came right down to the wire. The truce has brought the first break in the Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip since the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel on October 7th. Those attacks killed more than 1,200 people and saw 240 taken hostage. Gaza's health ministry, which is run by Hamas, says more than 15,000 people in the Gaza Strip have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. Let's cross straight over to our correspondent in Jerusalem, Tanya Kramer, standing by there. Tanya, the truce has been extended now. How did this extension come about?
Well, it was really just minutes before the truce was about to expire at 7 a.m. local time that the Israeli military released a statement saying that, they will prolong the what they described as operational pause, that the truce will continue in light of the efforts by the mediators to release more hostages. This was also then confirmed by Hamas and also by the main mediator here, Qatar. Now we understand that negotiations are underway. This is just an extension, as far as we know, for the next 24 hours, and there are negotiations still underway concerning the list that will be submitted or has been submitted for the potential release of the hostages for later today. There are reports whether this list will continue. Also, the remains apparently of some of the hostages that might have been killed in the past weeks. So this is one of the part of the negotiation, and the other part of the negotiation pertains, of course, to whether this truce will be extended. At the same time, there has been a shooting attack, a terror attack this morning in Jerusalem. Two attackers, as we understand from the police, were getting out of their car at a bus stop and were firing at a bus stop. And the first responders are saying that one 24-year-old woman was killed. We also understand just in the past minutes or so that another person has died of his wounds, and we have 4 more seriously injured in the shooting attack, as well as 3 people that were lightly injured. They were all taken to hospitals.
Okay, well, getting back to those hostages that were released, Hamas apparently released 16 hostages that it's been holding in Gaza yesterday. Among those freed are 2 Russian women, 4 Thai nationals, and 10 Israelis, all women and children, women and teenagers, rather, some with dual nationality. They include citizens of Germany, the Netherlands, and the U.S. We'll come back to them in a moment, but first, this report.
Finally free. Escorted by masked Hamas gunmen, the latest group of hostages to be released was received warmly by the International Red Cross in Rafah, at the Egyptian border. As the footage was beamed back to Israel, there were joyful embraces and tears of relief among the hostages' loved ones as weeks of worry came to an end.
I finally saw him briefly. He seems okay overall, cute and nice as usual, and I hope that emotionally he's resilient and strong, and he will get over what he went through. I still don't know what he went through, and tomorrow I expect to see him with my own eyes, meet him, hug him, kiss him.
I really didn't know what's happening with him, and in the moment that I saw him right now, I had no words. It was a crazy feeling.
Amid the celebrations, there remained concern for those still held captive.
I don't know if it is very happy about it, and yet my mother is there, so it is also sad for me because she was supposed to be released. She's 70, she's wounded.
Israel released 30 Palestinian prisoners, comprising 14 women and 16 children, according to the Qatari Foreign Ministry. Many of those released are teenagers accused of throwing stones and firebombs during confrontations with Israeli forces.
So, Tanya, 16 more hostages released by Hamas yesterday. What are the hostages who've been released so far been saying about their ordeal?
Well, so far we heard mainly from their relatives because the hostages themselves are a bit shielded away from the public. But there have been some accounts here in the Israeli media, for example, most of them saying basically that in the first weeks, they were getting enough food, but that in the past weeks, 2 weeks or so, the food rations were getting smaller, that they didn't really have enough food. For most of the elderly patients, what we heard from the medical staff that were treating them, some of them didn't get their medication they needed. Also, there was the case we heard about a young teenager. He said that, he was held in a separate room. There were also talks of beatings, that it was harsh. So there are different accounts that we are getting, but at the moment it seems that they're a bit shielded away out of the spotlight. But there will be more of these accounts, of course, coming, because there's also a lot of interest to understand where they were held during most of these almost now 2 months since October 7, and what happened to them during their captivity.
Tanya, thank you very much for now. That was our correspondent, Tanya Kramer, in Jerusalem. In return for Hamas freeing hostages, Israel has been releasing Palestinians held in Israeli jails. By Tuesday, a total of 180 Palestinians had been released. Tanya Kramer, who we just were speaking to there, filed this report about one of those Palestinians released, a 17-year-old whose family says he was arrested and detained after throwing firebombs.
For days now, Amani al-Muhlabi has been anxiously waiting for this moment. Her 17-year-old son Hamze was expected to be released from an Israeli prison as part of the delicate truce agreement between Israel and Hamas. He's been in prison for 10 months. I haven't heard from him since October 7th. I'm just waiting for him to come home. And then a moment of joy and relief. Hamze was 16 when he was arrested. The Israeli prosecution accused him of, amongst other things, supporting terrorism, grievous bodily harm, and arson on nationalist grounds. His family said he was throwing Molotov cocktails. He was never sentenced. He is one of the under 18-year-olds that Israel agreed to release from prison. Many are still being held in administrative detention.
I'm just excited to be among my people and with my family. I feel extremely happy now.
Nobody here wants to talk politics, as there's fear that they could be easily re-arrested. Amani al-Muhlabi, as a mother, is worried about her son's health. I'm upset. My son wasn't like this. Every week he had a haircut, he was wearing nice clothes. He's not like he used to be. He's changed a lot. For now, the family is just relieved that their son is back home.
Let's cross over to journalist Hazem Balusha now. He reported from Gaza extensively when the war began, and he joins us now from the Jordanian capital, Amman. Hazem, what are Palestinians saying about the release of prisoners, Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails?
It's important to say that the prisoners or detainees' cause is very important for the Palestinian society. Palestinians usually see the Palestinian and Israeli jails are heroes. They are fighting, or they fought for the Palestinian cause. So any release of these prisoners would be welcomed. All the Palestinians, they were welcoming this release. Maybe they didn't agree on the deal, or they disagreed with this deal. Whether worth it or not, but the release of the prisoners themselves were welcomed.
There are reports, Hazem, of an increased number of detentions of Palestinians happening now in the occupied West Bank. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, true. According to the official numbers, we are talking about over 3,000 were arrested since October 7. Those arrests from different cities, whether in West Bank or East Jerusalem, or some of them in Palestinian Israelis in Israeli cities. Those people probably, majority of them, they were arrested before and they were released for different reasons. Some of them were accused of throwing stones or Molotovs, or those who are, known as Hamas supporters, and all those who are writing over the social media supporting Hamas or other factions or the fighting against Israel.
Now, you're in Amman, but I know you're in touch very closely with people who are still in Gaza, where you used to have your home. Another day of truce, what does this mean for the people of Gaza?
It's very important. I mean, people was very worried that the pause would be over. Everybody was talking about this, whether it would be extension, will be more days, and this is very essential for them. The previous 6 days weren't enough for them to have a relief. Still, they are suffering there. There is a lack of everything: food, water, and other basic needs like electricity or internet, or even the telecommunication is very poor. So the extension is more hope that they will live more. Of course, the fear is that coming at some point that it will be over and the fighting might be resumed.
Hazem, thank you very much for talking with us again. That was journalist Hazem Balusha in Amman, Jordan.
Thank you.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Hans Jakob Shindler. He's a former German diplomat and a Middle East expert who is currently a senior director at the Counter-Extremism Project. Thanks for being with us. Hans, we're seeing an extension to the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, the temporary ceasefire. It's been extended now for another day. This has just been negotiated. What do you make of these arrangements between Hamas and Israel?
Thank you so much for having me. Look, this is an extraordinarily complex hostage negotiations, not only because of the number of individuals held in Gaza, but also because they are held by several groups, none of which are directly answerable to Hamas. Plus, of course, Hamas is using these negotiations to make political points, right? So when Hamas says they can't find hostages, I would take this with a grain of salt. This could be just a delaying tactic, because what Hamas wants to achieve is a regaining of ground within the Palestinian community, which it has lost because it cost the Palestinian community pretty much all of Gaza and thousands of Palestinian lives.
You mentioned that there are other militant groups that are holding hostages in Gaza. Talk to us about those. What groups are we talking about here?
Yeah, chiefly it's the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. This is a pure terror group that is much smaller than Hamas, but it's separate and a competitor to Hamas for power in Gaza. And then, according to various sources, there are anywhere between a couple of dozens to 40 individuals that are held by other groups in Gaza, primarily criminal networks that give themselves some fancy names, but we are talking about smuggling and criminal networks. These also are not part of Hamas, but in competition to Hamas. But for Hamas, it's going to be important that it, and only it, exchanges these hostages with Israel. That's the only way they can score political points.
So you're talking about a competition between the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas. Both of these groups, I understand, get support from Iran. Is that how you understand it?
Absolutely. So Palestinian Islamic Jihad was the original group that Iran adopted as its first proxy in the Palestinian territories. Hamas, the relationship only really became very intensive after 2012. So both of them are Iranian proxies. However, Hamas has political ambitions, Palestinian Islamic Jihad doesn't. And there is always been a competition outside killing Israelis, of course. For both, this is one of the chief aims that they want to achieve.
You say you're skeptical about Hamas making claims that it doesn't know where all the hostages are, but you're also saying that there are different groups who may be holding these hostages. Is it really clear how many hostages are there?
The sad truth is we only know what Hamas tells us. Hence, there is no independent confirmation whether it's 30 with the Palestinian Jihad or 50 with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And Hamas uses this uncertainty where those individuals are to really demonstrate to the Palestinian community, but also to its wider global support network, that it is in charge, it is in control of these negotiations, not Israel. Unfortunately, this is always the case when a hostage taker negotiates with the government.
We're sitting in Berlin. Of course, it's very difficult to say what's really going on inside Gaza. Not that many people know. But Hamas is saying that some hostages were killed by Israeli airstrikes. Do you lend any credence to that? Do you believe it?
I think, given the intensity of the military operations, it is likely that some of the hostages may have been negatively affected by these military operations. Until now, until last night, indeed, Hamas hasn't mentioned any names. And now that they have come out and said the mother and the two children are definitely dead, I would think that this is quite likely that they indeed were affected.
Do you think that that there's still room for continuing this temporary ceasefire?
Oh, definitely it's in Hamas's interest to do so. It is also in the Israeli government's interest to get as many hostages out in this early phase of the negotiations, because this is the, what I say, confidence-building stage. Any stage after this is going to be significantly more complex, and to be very honest, Hamas is going to ask for more when it comes to the military members of the Israeli Defense Forces that it holds hostage right now.
Some people distinguish between the political arm of Hamas and the military wing of Hamas. Israel says it wants to destroy, to annihilate Hamas completely. Many think that's simply not realistic. Well, how do you see it?
Well, it depends on what you define as destroying Hamas. Really, after the 7th of October, making a distinction between a political wing and a terrorist wing is no longer valid. The political wing is, of course, responsible for what its terrorist wing does in the organization. So, of course, there should be more scope to get more hostages out. And destroying Hamas infrastructure militarily in Gaza, that's what Israel can do. Destroying Hamas income streams is really a task for the entire international community, because it has various income streams beyond state support by Iran and by Qatar. Destroying Hamas ideology is going to be the big push here. We've seen with the Islamic State, we've seen with Al-Qaeda. Eradicating an ideology is a very political, educational task that is going to take many, many years.
Yakob Shindler with the Counter-Extremism Project, thank you very much.
Thank you.